the Denton County Collective is in effect.
Oh, I love it when we're in effect.
Oh, I love it when we're in effect too. That's wonderful. Yo, but why don't you start us off today? Tell us what we're doing.
Hey, I'm Joe Brown.
Oh, I'm Ryan Main.
I'm Jason.
And I am Joe's dad. I'm James Michael Brown, but you can call me Mike.
So my dad's joining us today, guys. We're gonna talk about some current events real quick. Let's get that on the table. What's happening today, Mr. Main, in the world?
Yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris was just announced to be the running mate for Biden. I think that's pretty significant. I'm excited about that. I guess it was between her and Rice, it sounds like. You guys have some thoughts on that?
I did, yeah. I thought she would have made a better attorney general, and I thought Susan Rice would have made a better state a Pompeo, you know? So I'm kind of surprised that he took her as a VP. That is really cool to me.
Yeah, I think he chose who he was supposed to. I was assuming he would choose Harris.
Yeah.
I'll say this about Harris. I like her because she is scrappy.
Yeah.
She doesn't back down from anything. I think she will be a good challenge to the GOP. She's very outspoken, maybe sometimes to a fault, but she's very outspoken. She pretty much wears her politics on her sleeve. I mean, you can actually, you know what she's thinking about almost every incident. So I like her for that reason. I've heard other people say that she'd have made a good attorney general, and I think that's true too. Susan Rice might as well. I think Susan Rice, if she was attorney general, would get in there and turn that place wrong side out from what it's become. It would no longer be an arm of the. It would no longer be the team of lawyers protecting the president and the GOP and their administrations. So it would go back to being speaking for the people it will anyway under Biden.
I think you're right.
No matter who he picks. So,
my biggest concern leading up to this was her as the DA in California. That would seem to be her weakness. But I think now that the BLM movement has been so effective and it continues, I think her argument's going to be, look, I've been the law, and I know how it works, and I know how to reform it. So and she's been a very outspoken person against the George Floyd death and the movement in general. So I think that's a really good move, and it's not really a negative anymore. When it used to be like, marijuana laws and capital punishment and some of the things that she's going to be attacked for.
Right. Just
not as important, as reform or...
Well, conservatives can't attack them for being the law and order candidates. They can't do that.
Right. Totally.
I'm worried that they're both too centrist, though. There is no progressive... neither one of them have a progressive bone in their bodies. And that's my
biggest complaint about this movement is that I feel like where it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but I'll take 2 steps forward. Like I'm not too above that. Like, but I feel like they're both so rigid, and I maybe we need that right now to get us back headed in the right direction. Like Dad was saying, like Mike was saying, turning us right side out again. And really just turning it around. And if this is what it takes, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I just read a good article that mentioned she's just the safe choice, and like Biden's ahead. Don't rock the boat. Let's make it safe. And I think that right now in this climate, I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm a progressive. I want the Bernie. I want the Warren, but they can have input. Like Bernie's given some input on some policies, and so let them have their input and be senators, and do a good job as a Senate. Anyway,
I don't even mind if
one of the things about Kamala Harris too is that she's young. She's a woman. She's female. She's going to bring all of that to the ticket. She's a woman of color. And so that's going to be important in so many areas. But not only that, if you remember Barack Obama, from how much he changed from the time that he gave the speech at the convention, until he became candidate for president, and how much he even evolved just during his candidacy was pretty remarkable. And I think we'll see some movement from Kamala Harris, particularly as the more she gets involved with the Biden campaign. So
I hope so.
What's going to happen? It'll be interesting, and it certainly is an alternative.
It's going to be fun to watch her debate Pence.
Oh my gosh!
Oh yeah. Speaking of Mike Pence, man, we have really. This is kind of why I wanted to bring my dad on today, is to talk about the overt politicizing of Christianity in general, but more specifically this movement of the evangelical right, the Christian right, putting their influence, using their influence to change what this country is, and and trying to drive it into a super conservative corner of the world, and by proxy, trying to adjust the climate of the world with their overt political maneuvering. And so, Dad, I wanted to ask you, and I know some of this, but for everybody else, I'd like to hear sort of your religious upbringing and sort of what makes you, in my opinion, an expert on the field of religion in America today.
An expert in some ways. In some ways, I'm certainly not. I don't have the scholarship that a lot of people have. I did go to Bible college. We'll get into that in a little bit later. But I started out. I was born in the country, in places that didn't have indoor plumbing. A lot of the places we lived and things like that. I was born very poor. My parents were extremely poor. My dad's mother and father were Mormon, and my mother's mother and father were Seventh-day Adventists. So if you don't know the difference, Mormons, of course, was a fairly new religion in the realms of Christianity. Many of the people I know as Christians think that Mormons are a cult. And I saw an interesting thing today that talked about how that some of the beliefs of the Mormons are so ridiculous. They said, you read books through stones, and you've got these secret gold plates that he was able to read and interpret, and then they disappeared, and all the stuff. That was Joseph Smith, who founded the Mormon Church. And there are some other very interesting stories in the Book of Mormon. But comparing that to Christianity, I have always believed that those stories, which are laughed at by so-called Christians, are no more ridiculous than Elijah going up in a chariot of fire in the New Testament, or the resurrection of Lazarus, or turning water into wine, or Daniel in the lion's den. You could go on and on and on.
Jonah,
Noah and the ark, and
Jonah and the damn whale.
Jonah and the whale, and all that. So when it comes to comparing mythological tales that are now have become parts of these religions, the Mormons don't have anything to be ashamed of.
It's just new, They're in a great investment company, though, like a investing in real estate. Like, they're really savvy. Like they're the Berkshire of religion, I think.
Yeah, they're taking up this planet, and eventually, if they're really good Mormons, they get to have their own planet. So good for them. More power to them.
I do want to say,
the point is that I had a diverse heritage. My grandmother was Pennsylvania Dutch, and she and her husband moved to New Mexico. She divorced her first husband and married his brother because he stayed home, and the other guy was a traveling salesman, and he stayed home partly because he was a hunchback and he had club feet, but he was a really good man. And she had 3 children by the first husband and 6 by the second husband. And then she married twice after he died. So the Seventh-day Adventists kind of frown on that. So also, there were no Seventh-day Adventists in Northwest Arkansas, where I am now and where I was born and reared. And they, so she ended up going to the Baptist church quite a bit.
Okay.
And, but Dad's parents were pretty much just kind of vagabonds. They were kind of like gypsies, sort of, not really, but they moved around from place to place looking for work. They just, picked fruits and vegetables and fields, strawberries and tomatoes, whatever they could find to do for work, and moved from place to place. I don't know that my grandfather, after he was a certain age, ever held a job where he worked for other people, like at a manufacturing place or something like that. But as they moved around the country, they had 10 kids. And as they moved around the country and the kids got 13 or 14 years old, they kind of got tired of this lifestyle. So they'd find some family to hook up with. And they would drop out of the family and go live with these other people who wanted to take them in, help them with their chores and stuff like that. Well, my dad moved in with a woman and her husband, and her name was Betty, Sister Betty, and she was Pentecostal, and she was a preacher, and they were faith healers. They believed in faith healing. They didn't believe in doctors. Mm. And actually, tragically, their daughter came down with appendicitis and lay there, and they prayed for her for like 3 days as she screamed in pain and finally died. But my dad was Pentecostal and believed in faith healing to some degree. He constantly plagued with migraines and other things. He'd been in World War II where he was wounded, and he had what they'd call PTSD now. They called it shell shock. He was terrified of lightning and thunderstorms and that sort of thing. Yeah. But he never forced that on us or anything, and didn't go to church when I was real young. I had 3 older brothers and sisters, and they did then. But I was living at Hickory Creek, Arkansas, not Hickory Creek, Texas. Some of you may be familiar with, but Hickory Creek, Arkansas, and there was an old one-room schoolhouse down there. That's where my mother and my sister and several generations of people had gone to school in this little one-room schoolhouse. And they were no longer having classes there, but there was a Pentecostal preacher and his wife that came down and used the old schoolhouse to have a revival. And so I became involved, and my sister did, and my mother and dad went to this church for a while. But so I was in the Pentecostal church for several years. Went to a little one-room church where they had alternate preachers come every Sunday. They had circuit preachers that came around, and they'd have a Free Will Baptist one Sunday and a Episcopal person the next Sunday, and Southern Baptist another Sunday, and so forth. And so we got all kinds of exposure to different things. They had the Episcopal guy didn't last very long. He wasn't really a ministry, he just was kind of a lay person in the Episcopal church, but he'd come and give a sermon. And they liked him pretty well until he started talking about sprinkling when you baptize. Uh-oh. And that was just more than they could handle. You cannot sprinkle. Right. Because John baptized Jesus in a certain place because there was a lot of water, so that didn't mean he certainly didn't sprinkle. Right. And so they kicked him out and wouldn't let him come back. And so that kind of upbringing. I left that church when I was about 16 or 17. I'd been the youth pastor, and I had the belief that you had to try to live a perfect life and be sinless and all that stuff. And I got up in front of the church at one of the youth meetings and said, you know what? I just can't do this. And I said, maybe some people can, but it's not me. And I think, to be honest, I don't think that I'm going to be able to live this so-called sinless life that people are supposed to have. And so I left.
Wow.
And of course, everything was sin. So just about. So it was, sure did open up my options. But
sure did.
So you said you were 16 when you left the Pentecostal church?
This wasn't really a Pentecostal church. It was a church.
They had different kinds of people. Did you want to preach elsewhere, or you were talking about leaving religion at that point?
I just left the church at that time. I wasn't against religion. I believed it was for some people. It just wasn't for me at that point in my life. Now later, I went through a lot of things when I joined the Navy. It was in 1970. I was up for the draft for the Vietnam War, and I joined the Navy and suffered for my country in Naples, Italy, for 3.5 years.
In a narcotic haze.
Not so much narcotics, but a lot of other stuff.
Now, what do you call narcotics?
Hallucinogens and a lot of hashish and pot.
those sound like narcotics, and that's fine. I love it.
That's good that you avoided Vietnam. I mean, that was a rough place.
Yeah, but I was there for 3.5 years and went through another religious conversion and gave up all that good stuff and quit smoking.
Another religious conversion to what?
Conservative Baptist.
Okay.
There was a Conservative Baptist church in Naples, Italy, where I was, and the pastor's name was Ronald McDonald. And
big guy.
That's I heard he had big feet, but who knows? Maybe his wife. But anyway, they were really sweet people, and I started going there. But before I started going there, this friend of mine and I, who were kind of, getting high every once in a while, or all the time, depends on your perspective. But he and I, he was actually in the Army. I was in the Navy. We worked for NATO, and my friend's father was a very religious person, and he lived in Switzerland. His father is an American, and he was born in New Jersey. My friend was, but when he was 3, his wife died, and his father married a Swiss woman, a little tiny woman, and his father would fill a door. He was just gigantic and gentle and sweet, but just huge. He had hands that were 3 times the size of mine. But he got involved with a tape ministry out of Houston, Texas. And it was a fellow by the name of Colonel
Sanders?
Bob Theme.
Bob what?
Theme, Thieme.
Theme.
Colonel Sanders.
Colonel Sanders.
And he was actually a lieutenant colonel, had been a lieutenant colonel in the Army Air Force before he became the Army and then the Air Force. So he'd been around for a while. But I was fascinated by him. His dad would send us he sent us a reel-to-reel tape player, and he would send us these reel-to-reel reels, and we would listen to Colonel Bob Theme do an exegesis of the scripture. Exegesis meaning going word by word, syllable by syllable through these scriptures and explaining what they mean.
Oh.
And we both first we laughed at it. We'd listen to this stuff, we'd laugh. And I laughed the most because Bob Theme would use words like son of a bitch and things like that. And I was not used to anybody from in the ministry or the pulpit using words like son of a bitch and bastards and things like that. Right. And, but he had no qualms about that. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And the more we listened, the more we kind of got involved with it and getting involved in the deity of Christ and all that. And so the sacrifice and all that. But my friend didn't want to go to church, but I kind of wanted to go to church. And there was a church, like I said, about 300 or 400 servicemen that attended and their families that attended this church. And it was a conservative Baptist church. The conservative Baptists are mostly in the Midwest, and there's a lot of them, I think, in like the Northwest, Portland and Washington, Oregon, that sort of place. But so I started going there, and then after I got out of the Navy, there were no conservative Baptist churches here in Northwest Arkansas. I had gotten married, by the way, when I was home on leave to a woman that I had dated before, Joe's mother, whom I had dated before I went into the service. And I actually got married because I thought I should, not because I was deeply in love or anything like that. But my religion I felt like I should. And what I haven't told you is that I was closeted gay, but I couldn't admit that. Because if I had admitted that, it would have meant I'm going to hell. And well, God would make it possible for me to not be gay, because gay people go to hell, and God makes salvation available for everybody. So there must be a way that I don't have to be gay.
Pray the gay out of them.
Yeah, pray the gay away.
I carried a picket sign not very long, well, a couple of years ago, that said "Gay the pray away."
Nice. That's really great. So were you guys pregnant when you decided?
No, but we'd had sex. So
you had sex?
We had sex, and so
okay. So it wasn't just that. It wasn't like
I never had a problem having sex with women. I just never fell in love with them. But anyway, so when I came back here, she and I came back here. We couldn't attend a conservative Baptist church, so we started going to Southern Baptist church, and really nice preacher. He was one of these very dynamic, preachers, and I taught Sunday school class or two, and he let me speak on a couple of the midweek services, and so he decided I was a preacher and that I needed a church, and so there was a little church up in the edge of Missouri called Jacket. A little town, a little community, actually. Wasn't even, I don't even think they had a post office, called Jacket, Missouri. And they needed a pastor. So he sent me up there to be their interim pastor. He wrote me out a license saying that I was licensed to preach. I had never been ordained, and I never have been. But so we went up there, and I preached for a while there, and for several months through the summer, and used up all my sermons, and decided I needed to go to Bible college and get some more sermons. So that was kind of the story. There's some funny stories up at that place. The deacons, there were two old deacons that were there, and both of them, one of them chewed tobacco, and he felt very guilty about that. But he had given the land to the church, so nobody said anything to him about that for sure. And the other guy was just another old farmer. They were good friends, and and they were really sweet people. One of the guy's sons was also a deacon in the church, and he had a little family. We might have 20 or 21 people there on a Sunday. But I preached out of the book of Revelation one time, and this one old preacher, one old elder, deacon that was there, that not the one that chewed tobacco, the other one, came up to me afterwards, and he says, Brother Mike, he says, that Revelation is hard to preach out of. And I said, well, I guess it is. I said, what about the sermon? He said, the sermon was good. I said, sermon was good. I liked it. You did good. But he says, I got to contradict you on one point. I said, what's that? He said, you talked about the 24 elders. I said, that's right. That's what the Bible says. He says, no, it doesn't. I said, what do you mean? He said, it doesn't say 24 elders. It says 4 and 20 elders. That's 420 elders. And, of course, King James Version is 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie. And I tried to use that. It didn't. It's right over his head.
Isn't 4 and 20 80?
4 and 20 would be 4 and 20 is 4 plus 20. 4 and
24
is 24. Yeah.
It ain't four times 20.
4 and 20.
Yeah, it ain't 4 score.
How did we get into math here?
The Bible's full of that.
It's either math or we're talking about weed spoken. So we can do either one of those at this point.
I do want to say it's pretty amazing that you refound religion after doing so much drugs. That's the takeaway I'm taking from this. You were in Italy, you were way too high, way too bored, said I need something to do, found religion, and went with it.
Well, I was a little lost.
Italy invites you to be religious.
I had two great druggy roommates until I let them know that I had feelings for one of them, and they asked me to leave. And I moved out for a while, but it was a while. But I only got into the religion part again a couple or 3 months later when they didn't report me or anything. When we started listening to this guy's tapes.
Okay. The reels. And
yeah,
it's always been underneath and underlying there, this convictionist thinking. But during all of these religious experiences from the early Pentecostal days all the way through to that, and then I preached at that little place, and then we went down to Dallas, and I went to Dallas Bible College. Dallas Bible College had been started right after World War II and lasted for a long time, until a few years after I'd been there. They went defunct because they tried to increase their campus, and they bought land and stuff over in Tyler, Texas. And they used to be right across from Eastfield Junior College. And they bought land in Tyler, Texas to open up another campus, and it broke them, and they went under financially. But I went to, and it was a non-denominational but very evangelical type college, very conservative. And you guys were talking about the beginning of the political movement. A lot of this started back during that time. This is in the late 70s. I probably started there in 75, I guess. And I only went about 3.5 years before my wife, who turned out to be extremely bipolar and schizophrenic, started having all kinds of problems, and I could no longer take care of my family and go to school. So I had to drop out after about 3.5 years. But this was the time when Dobson and Jerry Falwell Sr. and a lot of these people. There was a guy that wrote a book called The Late Great Planet Earth, predicting the end of the world and the coming of Jesus anytime now and all that stuff. It's when all this movement, the Christian right, started taking form. Now, where that's come to now, Joe and I talked about this a little bit the other night, is it's evolved into Christianity for profit. And I mean, that's been around forever. I mean, back in the 30s or so, the 40s, there was a guy named Father Divine who was a black preacher, and he had a radio show, and he declared that he was God, and he sat on a throne at his dining room table with the word God printed on it in gold letters, and he and whoever was at his table ate off of gold plates and gold flatware. And he had this radio show, and he would talk to these people about sending in their money, and you got to send in your money and I'll bless you. And he'd send them a vial of oil or a splinter from the cross or a handkerchief that he had blessed or whatever. From the cross. I
got a pile of cross splinters out in the back.
Yeah, you've seen what was it? The Robin Williams movie, where they talk about there was something like 400 of the foreskins of Christ that were sold back in the Middle Ages. Mm-hmm. But anyway, but it's that sort of thing. But that was just strictly out of greed and everything. Now, what that's evolved into now is a religion that is called the prosperity gospel. Mm-hmm. Now, when I was in the Pentecostal church and also in the Baptist church and all that, you had preachers that would preach, and they'd talk to you about tithing and giving in the offering plate and so forth. And some of them were charlatans. I told a story the other day. The little Pentecostal church that we were going to probably didn't have 30 or 40 people that went, but the pastor and his wife invited a couple to come in and preach a revival. Now, what that meant in the Pentecostal church is it's you're there every night. And if you're not there, people want to know why you didn't make it. But you're there every night, and everybody was expected to come. And they had this. Now, most of the women in that church probably had not bought a new dress in 3 or 4 years. They were poor people. But this woman and her husband came in, and she would get up there and preach, and she wore jewelry, and she wore these really fancy dresses, and she had her hair done and makeup and all that stuff. And she'd get up there and preach, and she would sit up there, and they would pass the plate after her sermon. They'd pass the plate, and she would say, "Now I know that somebody out there needs a blessing, and you're just afraid to give up to God what you know that you need to give up to God. There is somebody sitting out there on a $5 bill, and you need to give that to God and let him bless you. And she sat up there and milked every night. And my dad was there one the Sunday morning when she was there, and there was this family that he had been picking up and bringing into to church, and they were really poor. And the man was out of work, and they had like 7 children, and he'd pick her and her kids up. The man stayed home; he didn't want to come to church, and he watched her one morning give into the plate, and he watched her give 7 cents into that offering plate. And he knew that was probably all she had. Well, on the way home, he asked her to stop at this little mom and pop store for a minute so she could go in. And she went into the store, and she came out, and she had a real troubled look on her face, tears in her eyes. And Dad knew immediately what that was. She'd gone in there and asked for groceries on credit and couldn't get it to feed her family, and had given her last 7 cents in the offering plate. And here's this woman at the church that's just, well, my dad put together a group of people in the church, and they got a trailer that they pulled behind a car and loaded it up with groceries, canned goods, home canned stuff and all kinds of things, and took to this family. And they let us kids participate. We could give them toys that we had and stuff like that. And interestingly enough, you could make the argument that woman got blessed for the 7 cents that she had. Mm-hmm. These things, this is where what perpetuates this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Confirmation theory.
Yeah, confirmation theory. It's happening. I have proof. Watch this trailer full of goods just showed up at my door. I gave 7 cents at the store, at the church, to this preacher lady.
Yeah.
I have this trailer full of goods. Crazy.
But that brings us to the prosperity gospel. Prosperity gospel has taken hold, and it's the Joel Osteens, it's the Franklin Grahams, it's so many of these others. And what that has done is it's taken things that in the scripture, like if you have the faith of a grain of mustard seed, you can ask anything and it'll be done. There are a lot of these scriptures that they use. And they preach this same sort of thing, that you'll be blessed if you give and give and give. But that's turned around to the point now where if you're rich, you must be a faithful Christian.
Right.
Because God wouldn't bless you if you weren't a faithful Christian. And if you're poor, it's because you don't have enough faith. And if you come to my church and you give and show God your faith, He'll turn around and bless you, and you'll be rich like me.
Yeah. Well, that's what's happened with Trump and how they're using Jesus right now. The religious right Jesus doesn't mean what Jesus meant when the story was told. He has become a talisman of power for the religious right to use to tempt people like Donald Trump into using that as a tool. There's this. I was just watching a really good special on this exact subject. It's The Family is the name of the Netflix series. We talked about this last week, Ryan.
Oh, that's what it's called. It's
called The Family.
Watch. It really is an amazing watch.
And they talk about how that one focuses primarily on a guy named Doug Coe. Doug Coe and the family have infiltrated politics since, I think it was Eisenhower was the first one, or maybe it was Ike. Either way,
Eisenhower,
right? And they've been infiltrating politics that long, and Donald Trump. Doug Coe teaches this thing, and it's called the Wolf King analogy or parable, and it's how do you get the Wolf King on your side? Speaking of dogs in general, is you teach them that you show them you have more power than they do, And the power that they're using to show Donald Trump that they have the power is Jesus. And the effects, we talked about it, I guess, last week, as far as they're using this, Donald Trump sees the sway that even him just mentioning it at his rallies gets heads to turn, and for Christians to go, well, there he is. There's our king. This is our leader.
And they recognize and go into how they'll use him as a wolf, I think, analogy, right?
Right.
He's the big bad, not real good guy, but he's God's tool to make the world.
That's right. Better. Well, and he's not a sheep. He's obviously not a sheep.
He does the dirty work that they
they
clean.
Right. And has no qualms about it. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. The religious right had been waiting for somebody like Trump for a very, very long time. They would have preferred that he had been more in the form of Mike Pence, who pretends to be religious and sanctimonious and all that other stuff. But they are more than willing to take Donald Trump because he actually has the power to do the things that they want him to do. But the other thing about that is that they don't really care about his morals.
Right.
No.
They don't really care about his how sanctified he might or might not be. They don't care about his sins because they also believe that God can use evil people to do good things. I mean, and they'll show you
all the time.
Examples,
and you
things like
the whole story of King David being the closest man to God, and it's like he's this horrible murderer,
and a slanderer,
and philanderer.
Yeah.
On the that song by what's his name, Joe?
Leonard Cohen. Hallelujah.
About seeing Bathsheba on the balcony. I mean, on the roof of taking a bath, and he lusted after her so much that he took one of his best generals, Uriah the Hittite, who was her husband, and in order to free her so that he could marry her, he sent him to the front of the battle and had him killed so that he could marry Bathsheba.
Yeah.
And so, but the whole idea, that's why they don't really care that he's, you can point out you can sit there and point out all of his.
But, it's part of their selling point. It's part of what makes him attractive. And they get their Wolf King with Mike Pence sitting in the wings, waiting to actually drive the ship. It's like Dick Cheney and George Bush, where you had this truly vile, really calculated, super connected war machine of Dick Cheney and war profiteer, who was the driving force behind the affable fucking fool of George W. Bush. And, we've talked about this before. I'd much rather have a George W. Bush in the place that Donald's sitting right now, but we don't. We have a Donald Trump, and he is disgusting. His, he cites Norman Vincent Peale as his pastor. The power of positive thinking, and that falls right in line with what we're talking about as far as the meek shall, not the meek shall inherit, but not
that one.
No, absolutely not that. This idea that your mind, as long as you pray for it, if you're not praying hard enough, you're obviously not. Yeah, you will it to be, and it's that between Norman Vincent Peale, Roy Cohn, and his father Fred Trump, those are the nasty bits that make up this con man that we have right now running the country.
Yeah. So you brought up the meek shall inherit the earth. I want to bring up, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to inherit the kingdom of the earth. I think that's actually probably almost verbatim. How does the gospel of prosperity people, how do they reconcile the meek and the camel? Mike, how have you seen that reconciled? Because they surely have to talk about that together as a group, right?
Well,
Jesus is about the poor and taking care of the people.
Most every denomination that I've ever been in cherry picks and picks the scriptures that they want to believe, and they brush the others off their shoulders. They don't pay attention to the ones that don't fit with what their gospel is. One of the things that I've noticed about denominations and different people, is that almost every denomination has one particular thing that they kind of cling to that is their special thing.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in the Pentecostal church, somebody mentioned the Council of Nicaea. The big argument there back in 325 AD was
right.
About is Jesus God or is Jesus not God?
Right.
And actually, the elder who actually, the clergyman who actually won on that one was the one who said Jesus wasn't God, pretty much. And Constantine actually ostracized and kicked out the other guy. And there were all kinds of other things about whether priests should marry, and actually priests married all the way up until the 12th century, basically, when it became officially illegal for them to do it in the Catholic Church. But when I was in the Pentecostal church, we were members of the Pentecostal Church of God. And right across, not too far away from us, in another part of town, was the United Pentecostals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the difference in the United Pentecostals and in the Pentecostal Church of God is that the Pentecostal Church of God believed in the Trinity, and the United Pentecostals did not.
Mm-hmm.
They believed that there was no such thing as a Trinity, that Jesus was God and the Holy Spirit and all those things all in one. And they even sang songs about it. Their little songs, the One God and Only One was one of them that they used to sing. Well, people will grab onto this one thing that they think is their special thing, and that's why that you have all this thing. When I was in the Pentecostal church, I went through an experience where that I spoke in tongues. I was in a trance for a couple of hours as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old child. 10-year-old, 11-year-old children don't fake anything, but I was in this little trance, and the pastor's wife actually sat on the floor by me while I laid there and did all this babbling in tongues. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I want to say that every experience is a real experience, but not every experience is what it purports to be. And that's what you have to be careful of when you start using your experience to justify your religion. Well, I had this experience, so it must be true that such and such and such follows. And but anyway, the United Pentecostals would not associate with the Pentecostal Church of God because we believe in one God and you all believe in three gods. You know, it's the way they saw it.
Yeah. And it was the Pentecostal church was founded in early 20th century in San Francisco, correct?
They were
like the Haight District or something. I recall.
It was all about going back to the original church in the Book of Acts, where they spoke in tongues and they had the gifts of healing and all these things that they talked about.
Yeah.
And gifts of healing, gifts of prophecy, and all this other stuff. Right. So yeah, that started in the 20s, or I don't know.
Yeah, in California. I know this because my ex-in-laws were Pentecostal, and I went to a few of them. So I'm going to ask you a question now because I have all these questions written down. And
absolutely,
going on. But I'm going to interrupt once or twice with this because we're talking about it. One of the things that always bothered me was speaking in tongues. You know, like you mentioned, mm-hmm. Everything is real because it's happening. I remember when I was a devout Christian, I would go to this, I went to ACU for a while, and there was this beautiful Sunday service where everyone sang, and it was in a cathedral, and it was just it was beautiful.
Right.
And I would break down, and I'd have to walk to the side in a little dark corner, and I would just cry because I was being filled with the Spirit, and I could feel it, and I knew it was there. Mm-hmm. You know, I knew it because I felt it. Anyway, but I've had experiences like that. But one thing that always, as a non-believer, and at the time I was still sort of a Christian when I was going to these churches, but you know, she switched churches a few times. Like you said, they dissect, they have different ideas about what they think is right. So they change churches and, okay, I want to go to here because of the Trinity or not the Trinity, whatever. But I noticed the language of speaking in tongues varied by church to church. And especially with children, because to me it seemed like well, they're hearing mom and dad do it, and it's and then somewhere else it's another way of speaking in tongues. Like, so they learn this language of speaking in tongues, this blah blah, depending on how the people like do it.
Sure.
And I wonder about if you've ever really thought about that in terms of like the language of different people learning how to do it, and like.
Well, for one thing, theoretically, in the book of Acts, when they spoke in tongues, they actually spoke real languages that other people understood.
Correct.
It was done for that.
They did.
What they started with the Pentecostal movement was this, and they took these the verses in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, where it talks about the gifts of the Spirit, and to put it in context, Paul was talking to this church in Corinth because they just kind of gotten way overboard and gone off the rails in what they were doing. Right. They were turning the Lord's table, the communion and all that stuff, into a big feast. Some people would go hungry and other people would eat and stuff like that. Right. All these things. But he talks about the gifts of the Spirit. And one of the things he talked about was, if I do this, and even if I do this, and so it's if I talk with the tongues of men, or even if I talk with the tongues of angels and have not love, is the verse, right? All right. Well, what Paul was doing was theoretically and I don't want to be an exegetical scripture person, but basically he was saying, we speak in tongues, we teach, we learned other languages and stuff, but even if I talked with the tongues of angels, which I don't, and don't have love, it wouldn't make a difference. Well, what they did, what the Pentecostals did, and those people that you were talking about in Ashbury, wherever it happened, was they took it out of context to the point that they thought, well, we're not speaking in actual languages, we're speaking in the tongues of angels. Right. So it can sound like anything.
Yeah, but it does in Tyler, Texas versus Odessa, Texas. The tongues sound different.
Absolutely.
No, that's my point.
Well, and from person
it just depends on how you learn it. And that's simple as that. There's not none of that's a language. Now, the sad part is, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I would be sitting in the church and I would hear with our eyes closed while we're waiting on the Spirit to move, and someone would burst out into tongues, and I would know immediately who was doing that because they had this one particular style and everything they did. And then somebody else might speak in tongues at another service, and it would be totally different. And the thing of it is, if they would give a message, let's say, Shandalo Hikadiai Sundaya, blah, 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 and on and on. And somebody else would interpret it. Now, the message sounded exactly the same in the tongues because it's the same person saying it. Yeah. And the interpretation would be totally different.
Yeah. The couple times I've walked out of a church and because I thought it was because of that, someone started interpreting the person speaking in tongues. And, I thought it was evil. I mean, there's evil here trying to coerce us. Like I thought, now I don't believe that, but I was like, oh man, there's evil here. I need to leave. So I left, as a good Christian. I'm like, I'm not doing this.
Right.
Because the church was George Bush days, probably, it was like probably for his election. And they were politicizing their pulpit. And that always made me uncomfortable no matter when I believed in God. Like you don't talk you should not be bringing in politics. So someone starts going, and then some lady like, preacher's wife or deacon's wife stands up and's like, George Bush is the son sent to save us. Obama is not from America. Like, they were literally just...
We never did that when I was a kid.
Well, no, I don't think it happens a lot, but I walked out because I'm like, this is just ridiculous. Like, come on, is anyone else listening to this? And they all thought it was like, no, this God wants us to George W. Bush. And it's like, oh my, are you kidding me? Like, no, the Obama is the Antichrist. Like, look, we even just heard the interpretation right there.
Right.
You just said it.
And he's black and he's the Antichrist, and it's like, oh my gosh, I gotta go.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Now that was, you said, that was 20 years ago, Maine, or no, it wasn't that long. You said it was George W. Bush.
It was the H, W. It was like Iraq war time, the second war, the second Iraq war.
HW?
No, I'm thinking George Bush, George W, the dumb one.
Okay. Yeah.
The most recent one.
Okay.
Yeah.
But as far as the experience itself goes, there's actually a part of your brain that creates or feels religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be artificially stimulated for you to have a religious experience, a feeling.
Right.
And of course, people who've taken LSD or other things have talked about being one with the universe and all that. And that's because, and they know now that particular part of your brain can be artificially stimulated in order to give you a feeling of religious experience.
Well,
and so I think that the whole speaking in tongues, the getting the baptism of the Holy Ghost and all that stuff was just done in a sort of mass hypnosis environment that became popular through the use of religion to create those experiences. So
it definitely does that.
Ryan talked about also the just the music alone. My dad and I, we talked about this, and church was the first place that I saw music move people and was felt fully moved by music alone. And that is another tool and a super useful and super successful one that the religious right has been using since the beginning.
Right.
Well, not just the religious right, but just religion in general has been using. And it triggers those same parts of the brain that you're talking about.
In Bible college, Joe and I talked about this a while back. In Bible college, Ryan, we learned about the difference between hymns and gospel music.
Right.
A hymn is something that is supposed to elevate God and it talks about how great God is and talks about all of God's great, wonderful attributes and,
praise.
It's solemn. It's solemn versus joy, right?
Solemn, but it can be joyful, but it's all about the attributes of God. Whereas the gospel songs are about personal experience. I feel this, God's been good to me, I'm washed in the blood. It's all about me. It's all about my experience and our experiences and so forth. And that appeals a lot more to people these days than the idea of sitting back and just honoring and worshiping God. So there's that big difference there too, and that's all come through. But the politicization of the far right has just gotten so totally out of hand.
And Ryan, was that around the time you walked away from religion? Was when you started seeing the
Pentecostal stuff?
Or the use of, the speaking in tongues, or was it before that?
Yeah, it helped.
Or?
I was already kind of it was like my mid-late 20s. I was already having issues. This started for me in college, like when I was in my early 20s, like my transition, my transition to like atheism or non-belief. And I think I wouldn't have said atheism, 5 years ago, but probably from my 20s to my 35, so there was like a 15-year period it took, but this was like kind of early on, and this is one of the things that made it real clear to me, the televangelists, like we were talking about, the speaking in tongues. I never really realized like the singing part of it till probably 8 or 10 years after it happened, and I sat back and I'm like, but I felt God, but then it's like, I did acid when I was in my early 20s, and I met God there. He was a plant hanging down on a balcony, and like I connected in that way. I just connected. I was like, this is God, and I figured it out, and I was comforted, and I believed it. I really did. I was religious and I was tripping, and I'm like, that makes all the sense in the world. But then when I connect the feeling of that, which is just a hallucinogen, versus what I felt like in the church, and I'm like, oh wait, this is the same. It's tapping from that. Probably my right side of the brain that hungers for this something, this meditative state. So like transcendental meditation does this, meditation does this stuff. like hypnosis does this kind of stuff, and it's like that the trance stuff that everyone talks about. And yeah, I think really, like you mentioned, religion uses that as a tool, and then in different ways. Now, I have a whole bunch of questions I have written down. I'm going to skip some of them. Like, I want to know the difference between conservative Baptists versus Southern Baptists and stuff like that, because we've already spent about half our time kind of going through your background, and I'd like to really spend the remaining part. I mean, if it's okay, guys, but like talking about how we went from religious belief to atheism, and then like some of that conversation. You know, I'd like to, we can actually make this longer if we want to. But I don't want to skip over that part of that, because I could easily get into like talking about Baptists and like, I mean, I love talking about this kind of stuff, you know. I do want to make 2 quick notes that I think are interesting. Although I don't really like religious groups anymore, the Seventh-day Adventists that I've ever met, like they've been the best Christians. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're the most humble. They're the most caring, giving. They've been my favorite Christians. If I could like choose a favorite group, would be the Seventh-day Adventists. And it's definitely more extreme, you know, and it's a little bit more like pork, and there's some like rules, and it's some stuff like
a lot of dietary rules.
Yeah, like there's a lot of more old school like Jewish like concepts in there, maybe, or like Orthodox concepts.
You're talking about their kindness. Just quickly, my mother had. Her mother's relatives came to visit them here in Northwest Arkansas one time, and my mother cooked breakfast for them. She was a teenage girl. She cooked breakfast for them. And when breakfast was done, she said, my grandmother said, Josie, she said, Seventh-day Adventists don't eat pepper. And she'd salt and peppered their eggs and all this stuff. Oh. And my mother said, oh, no. She said, why didn't they say something? She said, because they were too kind to not eat it after you ate it. Yeah, so there's a lot of kindness involved. And a lot of religions do have wonderful, kind, sweet people. And, you know, the Seventh-day Adventists, their little claim to superiority is the fact that they worship on Saturday, just like the Old Testament teaches you to.
Right.
And why they're called...
That's one of the things that they cling to. Yeah. But I've always had really great experiences with those people. And I think that's one of the only sects or whatever you want to call them, like that I've just, it's consistent, you know.
I've known some wonderful Mormons too. I mean, I really have.
Yeah.
So.
You know, so little tidbit about my family. I'm related, my grandmother, so I'm related to Mary Baker Eddy, who started the Church of Science. And it's not Scientology for the listeners. But I wanted to bring that up earlier because they believe in the power of healing through God, not in the same way that they talked about before, but they did have similar ideas about, you know, pray it away, like just sit and pray. But there's a lot of good things that came from the Church of Science, like Christian Science Monitor is one of the better news organizations around the world. Right. And I'm kind of proud of that as my heritage. Like she was an amazing woman. Like she did a lot for the world, but again, it's one of those, like, you know, prayer will do it.
Well, yeah, you were talking about that family friend that died of appendicitis. We have a audio engineer friend, Stark Morrison, whose mother, he'll tell you this, but his mother passed away in a very similar situation, something totally preventable.
Yeah.
But she refused to get help because she was praying it away, and it fucking killed her.
Yeah.
It's really crazy.
So, Mike, how did you become an atheist? How did that manifest itself, or how did you figure that out? Like, tell us. Is there an easy way to describe that?
When people find out on Facebook sometimes that I'm an atheist, I mean, you can just pull up anything on my page now practically and find out about it. But a lot of times when people get to know me and everything, and then they find out that I'm an atheist, they always ask me, well, what traumatic event happened in your life that made you become an atheist? Uh-huh. And I tell them it wasn't an event, it's a process.
Right.
My coming out as gay was a process. It wasn't an event.
Right.
There was one night that I decided, you know, this is what I need to look into and see if that's what I really am when it came to that. But the same thing goes with my atheism. The thing about the atheism is, I think the main thing that, if I have to think about it now, there are two kind of separate situations that I thought about a lot. One of them more recently, but one of them I've thought about ever since I've been a Christian, ever since I've been religious. And the main one is this. And it didn't really start taking a really good form until my friend and I started listening to those tapes by Colonel Bob Thiem.
Okay.
And he listed, I think it's 11 attributes of God. Okay. And he's got all this nailed down. I mean, he's got, all the details about everything. But there are 11, not 12 and not 10 attributes of God, right?
Okay.
And I can't even list them all now, but they're the ones that made the most sense to me were omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence.
I hate those.
And then immutability. Immutability means you cannot change, period. If you are God, you are incapable of changing yourself. You cannot change. You are these things forever and ever and before time. And now, one of the other attributes is love, that God is love. Justice is another one. They go on and on. Mm-hmm. But God is all these things, and somehow he's all these things all together. And the ones, though, that really get me, and that most, I think, people who have been religious and then have overcome their religion, I started to say, but I'd say escaped it, are these, and that's omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence.
Mm-hmm.
If God is omnipotent, then God is
asshole.
Everything. Well, no, just don't get me.
That's that's omnipotent. I'm sorry. Yeah. You're talking about omniscient.
That first.
My bad.
The asshole comes later.
Yeah, my bad.
You're right. But it's not just the omnipotence. If he's omnipotent, that means that that there is no power that does not come from God. All power in the universe comes from God.
Right.
And so that means that every atom in the universe is held together by God. And you could go into quarks and other parts of atoms, but basically just to keep it simple for the other people.
But not the Eves, listeners, not the Eves, because the women are evil. Sorry.
I love the quark, by the way.
Trying to make a joke.
I love the quark.
Sorry, I had a call coming in. So if God is omnipotent, that means that all energy, all power in the universe is him.
Isn't that omniscience?
The second thing is omniscience, which means to know everything. That God knows everything there ever was to know, ever will be to know. It's there always with God all the time, ever.
Right. And
the third thing is omnipresence. God is everywhere. There is no place that God is not. The Bible even says he's in hell. Okay, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, God, if he's omnipotent and he's in all of these, he's in charge of all the power in the world. If he's omniscient and he knows everything that there is to know, and he is omnipresent, he is everywhere at the same time, forever, then God is responsible
for everything.
And if there are millions of children in Africa or in America or anywhere dying of starvation and hunger or abuse or torture or all of those things, God is there in every way that he can possibly be there. He knew about it before. He knows about it now. He'll know about it afterwards. As a matter of fact, he knew about it when there was no time. So then God cannot be loving.
No, can't. And so I wasn't raised with these Mr. What did he call him? Mr. Theme? Mr.
Bob Theme, yeah.
Okay, yeah. These are the 11 things that you said Mr. Theme said.
Oh,
so
the 11
I didn't really grow up with that.
Of God, yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't really grow up with that because, like, if God knows everything, he knows the future, that means, then why did he have to kill us off or all the humans the first time? Like, he would have already known that would happen. And the argument is, I think in religion is like, he wants to give everyone the chance to make their own choice, even though he knows what the answer may be. But that's why I never really, you're right, free will. but I've come from a more free will perspective when I was taught, I guess, religion, because I think it's so easy to pick apart that argument about omnipotence and omniscience, because it's like, well, he knows all this is happening. You know, like, what about the people, the Jehovah's Witness, and people, there's only like X amount of thousands of people going to heaven. Like, why would you create billions of people and only a small fraction of them be saved the right way, you know, and like join him in heaven? Like, why would you? Let me ask you, Mike, if you were younger and God came up to you and said, you know, you can have 10 children. I'm going to bless you like Job. I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to take away like Job. So, you know, 7 of them or 5 of them or 3 of them, let's say 3 of your 10 children are going to be in heaven and they're going to be great, but 7 of them aren't going to make it, you know, like why would you even have children? You know, like if you were a father, why would you, knowing 70% of people are going to be dead and are going to burn in a hellfire? Mm-hmm. Why would you even actively even make the choice to have a child? So that's I don't like the omniscience and the omnipotence thing, because it's like so obviously struck down by logic that he is not love. He is not love.
Can I just say, nothing you said says that God has the ability to change anything, just that he's everywhere, he knows everything, and he is everything, but not that he can change anything.
Well, he has all power, too.
Well, yeah, if he has power, then he can, he right. should. And that, I mean, and I think that's kind of the point, though, Ryan, is that I don't like it either. And you're right that it taps into the logic part of it, but logic doesn't play much part in most religions that I've seen.
That's true.
Religion, as a matter of fact, faith in general is the complete blocking of logic. It is omitting any sort of logical.
Omissions, I like that.
Yeah, because you're choosing that. Well, this is my faith led me here. My faith. Right. The preacher man told me to vote for Donald Trump because that's the direction we're going. And there's
a greater good.
There's a greater good. I have faith in that.
Let me give you my take on free will.
Please.
There's no such thing. And the reason I say that is, and I think of this story. And you've probably all heard, and I don't get it right whenever I say it, but the general idea is there. The story about the nail. For want of a nail, a shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, a horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of the rider, the message was lost. For want of the message, the battle was lost. For want of the battle, the war was lost. When I was in Bible college, there was a group of young men, and they had come up with this idea, and I don't know where they got it, that God let you choose among several different options about most things, which kind of car you're going to drive, or which kind of, maybe even down to which woman you're going to marry. Maybe there were 5, 6, 8, 10, 20 women you could choose from that God would be more than happy with. And they had this idea. And I came back to this whole idea about for want of a nail, the war was lost. Because there are no insignificant details in life. You can walk out the door and take a wrong step and fall down the stairs, or you can take the right step and make it down the stairs perfectly fine. But all of that, if God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, is in the control of God. It is not in your control at any point in your life if you believe in God, in that God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as free will. I think rationally and logically, if you believe the O words, that's correct. I believe everything. It's like fate. Right. You know, I don't believe in that either. it's like there's no point. No point.
And without those O words, though, is God really God?
Right. Without omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence,
I would argue. I could easily argue that, but I don't want to. I don't want to argue that. Okay. Is there? Could God be not omnipotent, omniscient? Yeah, he could. He could be the creator that started this roller coaster, and he built the roller coaster, or he he created
And then
the
walked
rapids.
away.
He created the rapids and then plopped you in the rapids and like, okay, now he's just chilling. The last time I believed God, I believed in a hands-off creator God.
Mm-hmm.
Like very hands-off. Like, okay, I gave you the tools. It's up to you. I'm not intervening until I'm ending the world. Like, I'm not coming back till I'm hellfiring the world, basically.
Like, he directed the movie and now it's playing and now he can't control it anymore, but he made it.
I mean, directing is a lot of control, though. I mean, the movie doesn't ever change, though. You know, it's like God, Lord of the Rings. They created the armies that fought themselves. So instead of God is the man who programmed the computer, so the armies would fight each other and make their own decisions. Like that's how I if we're gonna go movies, I'm going Lord of the Rings armies. You know, that's how I'm dealing with that.
But yeah, it's more like he had control initially, but now he doesn't. He just knows what happened, and everybody else is watching the movie, and he's like, "Yep, this is what I set up."
Yeah. But even with those things in consideration, I mean, how do you somebody from that place where you're like, I set this in motion, I did it, my bad.
Right.
I messed up. I'm going to start over. That's what he did.
Or yeah, sure, and then flooded the place and started over, and sure, but for what, you know, and then it comes to what end. For what purpose, you know?
And does praying even matter if everything already happened? Why pray?
If it's set in motion and is going to go the way, then what could you pray? If God doesn't have control, then why would you pray to such a fucking?
Yeah, I think it's easier to understand God without the big O words that we're using, and I really do.
But I don't think. I mean, why do you think it's for you to understand what God is? Like,
well, it's not. If there was one, maybe.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's what people will say.
Right.
You know,
it's
not your place.
God
like you know, a minuscule amount of things. Like, true, I do.
I do.
But these are also just an opinion. It's just like your opinion, man. You know,
it's just like your
everyone.
Opinion, man.
But like it usually boils down to faith. The argument between which is the acceptance, even though you don't have the proof. Like that, almost everything comes down to that argument when you talk about religion and Christianity.
Right.
Which is why, I mean, I could talk about these little aspects, and I'd love to debate some of these things just for fun. But I do really want to get into like how, Mike, I asked you this before, but like how, like what the process looked like a little bit more on like a activist scale, or like when you started believing you didn't believe anymore. How did that change your evangelizing of people's thoughts or minds or beliefs? Like, does that make sense? Is that a stupid question?
Well, it does. As I progressed through life, I didn't become nearly as evangelical as I used to be, reaching out to try to win other people over for religion.
Right.
So that by the time that I did get to the point where it's not that I didn't believe anymore. It's just that I believed other things.
Right.
I didn't believe in God anymore, but I believed other things. Like I said, it was more of a process than it was an event. And when I moved down here I was in Reno, Nevada for 4 years. Before then, I lived in Texas for 28 years. But when I moved here to Northwest Arkansas, I started going to a freethinkers meeting that met every Friday. And it was just a bunch of people getting together and talking, kind of like we have here. And talking, and sometimes not even about atheism or religion or anything, just talking. But I knew right away that these were my people, that this was where I belonged, with these kind of people. And a lot of my beliefs became more clear to myself. They formulated into actual beliefs and thoughts and so forth.
Through discussion with other people.
Through discussion with other people. Mm-hmm. And I realized that there were other people who had the same questions that I had, and some of them had found some answers for them, and there were other people out there that had answers.
You were in your late 50s, early 60s when that happened.
I was in my 50s. Yeah. Late 50s. Yeah. For sure.
Are you in your 60s now? Can I ask?
Yeah, I'll be 69, 26th of this month.
Okay.
So
how quickly did you adopt the big, scary, evil A word? Like, how did you finally? Because to me, that's a process for me.
It wasn't.
It took a
it
long
wasn't really
time.
that hard.
Congratulations, man! I wish it was easy. It wasn't.
Let me tell you what my mom said. My mother's been dead for many, many years. She died in 1981. But my older brother, I had an older brother named Chester, little short, scrappy guy, just tough little guy. But he went off to college. He was the first one who ever went to college. And he came home for summer break or something from college and had become an agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother is a little short thing. She's about 5 foot tall, 4'11", actually. Little short, thin, scrappy thing. She smoked. She had a cigarette in her mouth like this. And she's smoking. And my brother Chester told her that he was an agnostic. He says, Mom, he says, I'm an agnostic. She was she'd been raised on the Seventh-day Adventist / Baptist side, and she was pretty much Baptist more than anything else. But he told her that he was an agnostic, and she said, at least an atheist will tell you they don't believe in God.
What are your convictions?
Pick a side.
I feel like I was forced into the word atheism. And I think I was forced politically into atheism. And I say that by myself, not by anyone else. Like, I think that I have to use the term atheism to spread the word of my word, which is I don't want your religion involved in my country, in my politics. Like, I don't think you need to be legislating any of your religion. So if you're going to be so loud about your belief and faith and how babies die or not die or whatever your thing is, like controlling whatever you want to do, I got to be against it. And I got to kind of have to use this word because, I am not for that. And, agnostic would, in like a perfect world without judgment, that'd probably be the closer thing, is like, I'm smart enough to know that I don't know shit, like I really don't know much at all. I know how, like, I've read stuff like how to, I can use a compressor, pretty well. Like, I've learned little things, little crafty things, but I don't know. There's no proof. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's the difference between you and the religious right, is that they feel the calling, not a desire, not a want, but the calling through their faith, that you have people in their mid to late 20s in the Senate sitting there with zero, knowing what I know now, being 40, knowing that they know nothing. Mm-hmm. And they're pushing legislation through that affects everything that I do in my life, in my home. They're pushing that through in their 20s, making those decisions for the rest of us. And they feel that calling to do that for a couple reasons. Sometimes it's for, their family pressure, or they have money they got to burn up, so they might as well burn for something. They're not doing anything else with their life. But they feel that the religious pull to change the world. And somebody sat down and said, "You're charismatic enough. You're just the right looks and demographic for this election. Mm-hmm. You're white, male, and you're young. And let's get you in this office. There's a seat coming up, and let's put you in place, so you can force our legislation through."
Joe Kennedy.
And Joe Kennedy is the least of them. He's one of the more, the ones. He's one that I'd actually like to see in that position. If there's going to be anybody doing it, the guy's progressive enough to actually make some changes that are for the positive, like we said, turning the right side out again. But he's among them. But then those people sit in office for 20, 30 years, continually pushing the button on making the world, their world and our world, more right wing and more conservative and more Christian. And
some of these things, like so I was blindly Christian, I would say, and tried really, really hard, man. I tried really hard. So I understand it. Like, I have a lot of problems with my brother because we just don't have we don't come from the same point of view, but I understand his point of view. And I just don't feel like he understands mine because he's never had that. Like, for example, politics, like I didn't realize how political religion is until I just really didn't believe it anymore. And there's like, I'm not sure what I believe. Like, there's like, but when I'm like looking without filters on, and you like look over, like, oh my gosh, this is all just power. And then, okay, let me go look at the Bible. Oh, this. I'll read something. This means something different to me. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, let's go to the translations. Like, let me look that up. And that's kind of why we brought up the Council of Nicaea earlier, because I asked Mr. Brown if we could talk about the history of the Bible and when some of the changes happened, and maybe when like the word Satan was introduced to history and that kind of stuff. I'm losing my train of thought. Shoot.
It's fine. Well, you're talking about the difference between
without the filters, and right. like it's all about control. I mean, it doesn't matter if you agree with that or not. I mean, but I didn't realize a lot of those things when I was a believer. And then like now it's like, oh my gosh, it's so obvious, like it's just like, oh. And then when I looked, like last night, I spent like 30, 45 minutes researching the different codexes. Is it codexi? I don't know. The different codex, I think that's a plural, or it's a plural word too. Different codex that the Bible was taken from. And like you sent that great meme around.
King James.
That King James version of the Bible.
Yeah. Like, and I loved it. And I actually researched all of it to make sure it was all accurate, actually. So I did. Because I'm like, I don't know about this. And I looked it up. The King James version of the New Testament. So I looked up the NIV version, and it changes. I mean, it's a more scholarly approach, but it's not very far off. It's not very far off. So
that's true. And the other thing about that is that most of them use the King James version of the Bible as their basis when they make a new translation. Some of the translations just change the language that used to be in the King James version to modern language, because they're saying like, let your conversation be forward and upright, and it has nothing to do with speaking. It's your whole way of life was the word from the King James time and so forth. There's just so much of but yeah. And
let me read this real quick. It says the King James version of the New Testament. The King James version of the New Testament was completed in 1611 by 8 members of the Church of England. Actually, when I researched it, it said there were 6 or 7, so I don't understand the 8th. Maybe it was the king. I don't know. Anyway, they were and still are no original text to translate. The oldest manuscripts we have were written down hundreds of years after the last apostle died. There are over 8,000 of these old manuscripts with no two alike. I looked it up, and that's what it says too. The King James translators used none of these anyway. Instead, they edited previous translations to create a version their king and the parliament would approve. So 21st century Christians believe that the Word of God, quotation marks, is a book edited in the 17th century from a 16th century translations of over 8,000 contradictory copies of 4th century scrolls that claim to be copies of the lost letters written in the 1st century. That's not faith, that's insanity.
Fourth century being the oldest ones that they took from, a lot of them hundreds of years after that.
Right, like 325 AD or whatever you want to use. Right. I think is the word. That's the Constantine time, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the defense of people who are maybe believers or Christians, when I looked all this up, the big glaring thing, and I spoke to my parents today about what we were going to talk about, and they talked about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I looked all that up, and it is kind of interesting. And I think that there is some proof for the oldest translations being the Old Testament. Like, I think we can go back pretty far with old manuscripts with the Old Testament, but that is not the case with the New Testament in any way. And I think there's a lot of conversations I want to really have personally. I don't know if you guys do, but talk about like when these things and why these things were changed. And when I dig into it, it's all about power. Like that's what it reads now with my filter. I did this when I was a believer, not that much though. I had to go to college and study Bible like more intensely before we even touched this. And then I went to secular school, still studying religion, being a religious person, and studied it. And that's when I was like, whoa, whoa. Like they never taught me that. I don't believe you. I don't believe you, secular person trying to make me a Democrat. You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe you. And my teacher at the time, a philosophy teacher, he's like, I was a Baptist minister, and he, had that kind of a similar story. And he just showed me some history, and I read it, and I was like, I mean, the only reason why they do that is to keep the slave system in the realm. Like, I mean, that's the only reason why he's like, of course,
yeah. King James wanted something also that would support his right to be head of the Church of England and all that. So,
right.
So he didn't much care for a lot of the Catholic scripts that had been used, the ones that had been used by the Catholics.
Right.
And for instance, the Catholics, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not that familiar with the Catholic Bible, but I think it has the books of Maccabees in it.
Well, there's 14 Apocrypha books.
And there's, at least, and a lot of others that wouldn't even get close to getting into the canon.
Right.
But they... the Maccabees was the period from about 400 BC to the time of Christ. And there's nothing in the King James Version that actually covers that period.
Right.
So, it gives a Jewish history of that. But,
right.
the whole history of that. But here's the thing. For ourselves, we can take that information and everything and make evaluations and determinations. But those arguments are never going to convert anybody from not being a Christian, because their Christianity, like the gospel version as opposed to the hymn version, all has to do with their experience and their parents' experiences and all these other experiences and all that stuff that's been handed down. And for so many of them, there's not going to be any taking that away.
That's right.
They don't work on logic. They work on emotion and on feelings. And I feel this way about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the case. I mean, I kind of wish I could do that because, I used the word evangelizing earlier. I didn't mean as an evangelical right-wing stuff. But, I mean, I was taught to spread the word. And now that I don't believe in the word, I'm still under the thought processes of I should help people still understand my way of thinking. It's just selfish and egotistical, honestly.
Well, I tell people I'm not an evangelical atheist. I don't go out trying to convert people. I will willingly have any sort of a conversation, and sometimes I call people if they call people out if they say something stupid. But I don't do that in the sense of wanting to convert somebody to be an atheist, because I could care less.
Right.
It would be, to me, would it be a better world if everybody was like that? Probably, maybe not. Some pretty bad atheists out there too, pretty mean people.
Yeah.
But as far as being an evangelical atheist, I don't. But I am prepared to discuss it with people if they choose to make that an issue.
Yeah, I think the first thing I read was Richard Dawkins when I first started looking at atheism. And I was really turned off by that because at least Christians pretend to try to be nice and loving. Dawkins is like, you're stupid. You are stupid if you believe this. And he was very much like a make fun of type of person to me.
I
posted a thing by Richard Dawkins, just a quote, which was I thought was astonishingly smart.
Yeah.
And I posted it, and a friend of mine, one of the guys I graduated with actually from high school, has a son who has Down syndrome. And Richard Dawkins said some extremely cruel and mean things if you are a person with Down syndrome or have a child with Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And they pointed this out to me, and I said, well, I don't agree with everything Richard Dawkins says. And he, and that was very callous. He actually said that why would a woman even want to bring a child into the world if they had Down syndrome, And that was taken somewhat out of context, but not altogether. And then his apology was even weaker. So some of these people are not. But one of my favorite people as a child, as a young teenager, was Madalyn Murray O'Hair. I used to see Madalyn Murray O'Hair on Phil Donahue and some of those talk shows when she was going to Dick Cavett later. And I thought she was fantastic. She just stand up to these people and say the most outrageous things. Even this was much later, but her son became a Christian for a while. And that son may still be, I don't know. But anyway, he left her whole the American Atheist Organization, which is, and one of the interviewers asked her, would you, if your son gave up his Christianity and came back to you and begged your forgiveness and wanted to come back into the organization, would you forgive him and accept him back? And she said, hell no. She said, you don't understand. We don't have to live with your ideas of forgiveness and love.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, we don't.
Yeah. No.
Some people do because it's the more humane.
Sounds horrible, though. It sounds pretty horrible.
Sounds horrible when it comes to that, but
it sounds pretty horrible.
It's true. But I was impressed with her and in her conversations with Phil Donahue, and she got up in the face of that real right-wing conservative guy. Can't remember his name right now, but anyway.
Yeah, you're talking about Richard Dawkins and these people that are abrasively atheists.
Mm-hmm.
I've also been turned off by that, seeing that, as far as like I want people to be there's this conflicting thing that lives inside of me. I want people to be as happy in their sedation as they need to be to function properly, right? And I think religion is a huge sedator. It's also a motivator to enact, again, like we've said before, very oppressive things. But for the most part, I feel like people in general are sedated by religion and find comfort in it. It's a catch-all for their worries. It's a catch-all for their fears.
The opiate of the people.
Right, absolutely, the opiate of the people. But the other part of that is that they are enacting all these legislation and attacking with the really, really poignant, very defined points of entry into our lives that are taking away our rights and our freedoms and our liberties. And that's, one of the things I asked you guys when we were getting ready for this sort of this talk is like, how do you feel that religion has affected your lives directly? And I know that it has been a huge, in my life, I have friends and family, my dad included. This is something that blew my mind, and we've talked about it before, but it kind of just dawned on me a couple of years ago when gay marriage was made legal nationwide, federally. And it dawned on me shortly after that my father, I've had more rights than my own father since the day I was born. The day I was born, and I, was born luckily straight, ish, for the most part, I feel.
How's that work?
Yeah, not bad. So I can marry the person that I want to marry as soon as I am of age to do it. My dad, who is in love with men primarily, cannot, and that's just a basic fundamental. That isn't even dealing with the people who have had less rights than even him, but just on that really basic level, because of religion, my father wasn't allowed to be the person he was meant to be or was born to be.
For years and years and years, did everything I could, including marrying somebody and having children, in order to.
Thanks for doing that, by the way.
And to be the person.
Yeah.
How cognizant of that were you when you made that choice to marry Mr. Brown?
I was still in denial of the fact that was the only option for me.
Right. You were still praying it away.
I was praying it away and hoping it away, and well, this won't happen again, type thing, and after I was divorced, Joe's mother had serious bipolar and schizophrenia issues and that sort of thing, and I raised my kids from the time Joe was less than 9 months old and Amber was 4.
Wow.
And 4 years old. And without a lot of help, some help, mostly through the church. But after a few years, I was in bed one night and I decided, I really need to find out what this side of me is about. And I picked up, we were living in Hickory Creek, Texas at that time. And I picked up, I could have picked up the Bible, but I didn't. I picked up the Dallas telephone directory, which is about 4 inches thick. And I thought, I'll just look up the word gay in the white pages and see what's there. Thinking, there will be John Gay and
1-900-GAY
and all that stuff.
Oh, gay, Mr. Gay.
And
I just called that last.
Stop calling me.
Marvin Gaye is like, what the f-?
Marvin Gaye. A little late for that, I think. But anyway, I picked up the phone and I was going down through there and I saw this entry for gay line. I thought, gay line, and just had that and a telephone number. And I called and I talked to a guy there and I said, I see that this is gay line. I said, what's this about? And this was, by the way, in the early stages of the AIDS epidemic when it was all public, but no knowledge about it. I mean,
late 80s, early 90s, yeah.
But I called this guy and I called this telephone line. This really nice guy talked to me and I said, so this is for gay people? He says, yeah. He says, it's just a helpline for gay people. I said, well, who sponsors it? And he said, the
gays.
Cathedral of Hope. Cathedral of Hope.
Cathedral of Hope? Okay.
Yeah, it's a real place.
And I said, really? What's that? He said, well, it's a church that ministers mostly to gay people and gay-friendly people. And I said, so you try to convert them to not be gay? He says, oh, no. He says, we're very accepting of gay people. And he says, but we're not here just for the church. I said, really? I said, what for? He said, well, we're just here for anybody. He says, of course, we get people calling about, they're worried about AIDS and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I'm not worried about that. And he said, well, we tell people, where they can meet up and that sort of thing. I said, well, where could I meet some other gay men? And he said, well, most of us meet each other at the bars. And I thought, here's a church that's sponsoring me going out to a bar and meeting gay people. And so we talked for a while, and I said, well, where would you go? He said, well, I like the Roundup Saloon. It was a gay cowboy bar down on Cedar Springs.
This was a local line, right? You're saying it was a local
Dallas,
line?
So Dab was living in Denton County, yeah.
Dallas, it was the Dallas City Directory.
Okay.
And so he told me all about the Roundup and all that stuff. And he said, I said, well, I wouldn't even know how to dress. I said, I don't have any cowboy boots. He said, well, you don't have to wear cowboy boots. He says, people wear loafers or whatever there. And he said, just jeans and a polo shirt. And this is how ignorant I was. I said, what's a polo shirt? I didn't know what a polo shirt was. And it turns out I had some of them, but I didn't know what they were.
The collared ones, the little collared.
You're wearing one right now.
I'm wearing one.
Yeah, totally.
Right now. No little
gay. So gay.
So anyway.
You can only be gay in Dallas if you dress with cowboy clothes, or we won't have you.
That is not.
You didn't know. You just didn't know.
Just one of 10 or 15 different bars that were in the Dallas area at that time.
Yeah, but it was also the late 80s, early 90s, and you asked him, what place, and he's like, Roundup Saloon. You're like, I don't know, in a cowboy hat. And he's like, you don't have to.
Come as you are. Come as you are.
It's always the question for a man, what do we wear,
The kid, got somebody to watch the kids one night, and I went down there and I was terrified, and I was sitting there holding a beer, and I'm sitting here looking at this dance floor, and there are all these cowboys out there dancing with each other, guys in blue jeans and laughing and carrying on, waltzing or two-stepping or whatever together. And I thought that's pretty cool. And then the music changed and a line dance came on. It was one called the Matador. And here are all these guys out there in lines, step by step, following each other and doing all these turns and twists, just guys. And I looked out there and I thought, this is where I belong.
That's awesome.
And a church brought you to that.
That's awesome.
Indirectly, and it's the biggest gay church in Dallas. It's still there.
Wonderful. Yeah, I used to be a part of the Metropolitan Community Churches. They were in that denomination, and now they're not. They went to the United Methodist, I think, or one of those. But it's a very liberal Methodist type church, I think.
So a religious organization by proxy helped you find your homosexuality.
Yeah, exactly.
Or helped you define it. That's wild.
Well, he metaphorically paid his 7 cents.
They're still down there and going strong, yeah.
Dad paid his 7 cents.
What's that?
You paid your 7 cents. Yeah, I'm sure that phone call that wasn't
I paid
free.
my 7 cents.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This is really important, I think. Wait, did you live in 2 Hickory Creeks in 2 different states?
I did. I grew up in...
Okay, I thought I heard that. I'm like, that's weird. That's super weird.
Hickory Creek is where I grew up, is out west of, east of Springdale, Fayetteville, that area. It's east of there. And right now it's Beaver Lake. When I was there, I was actually living on in a house with my parents and my little sister when they put Beaver Lake in, and they made us leave the house because it was going to be covered with water. And so that was
Brother Orata.
162, something like that, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a little later. But yeah, that was Hickory Creek, Arkansas. And that's where all my family are buried, is in the Hickory Creek Cemetery there. And I've got a plot there and all that. And then moved to... Are
you going to do it? Are you going to go on the plot?
Dad's already there.
Are you going to bury yourself in this plot?
Yeah,
I'm going to bury myself. Somebody will have to do that for me. I don't think I'll be...
I guess that would be hard to do, right?
So I've got a really cool picture of, so just quick little thing. We every time I go out there, because right there on that same plot, just up the hill is our cousin Jerry, my dad's cousin Jerry, who kind of maintains the whole thing. He oversees the
cemetery.
A coordinator, yeah, and Dad's kind of on the board to do that, and so all my dad's family and my mom's family are all buried in this tiny little cemetery.
That's kind of cool. I mean,
it's really cool. So we took Juniper out there, and there's a big pavilion now built on the space that used to have the old school, the one-room schoolhouse that Dad was talking about. That they had all the
revival where I got saved.
Right, the revivals in this place, and but it burned down a decade or so ago, and but we go out there just a year or two ago with my kiddo, and they've got a little outhouse that my cousin Jerry built there so that people can use the restroom, while they're having their services or whatever. And so Dad and the kiddo are walking into the cemetery, going to start looking at plots. And I had to use the restroom. I got to pee. Stepped inside there, and I came out a couple minutes later. And I look up the hill, and Dad is laying down on his plot. and my child, his grandchild, is taking pictures of him from the different on his plot. Where
which way you want to go, Dad or Grandpa?
Oh, fully. It's all the headstones are. It's great. It was an awesome little moment. But that's he grew up in Hickory Creek, Arkansas, and then raised us in Hickory Creek, Texas. That's pure luck.
Yeah. I usually want to slap people, because I'm kind of opinionated, and I usually want to slap people when they talk about being buried. I'm like, why are you going to be so selfish? Like, why do you got to take up this land for ever? But if it's like, okay, you got a family plot, it's already there. it's like, that's kind of cool. Like I could dig that, but I'll judge you. I'll generally judge you until you say something cool like that, maybe. But it's like, why would you take up that space? Like, aren't you into science and making things better? Like, I mean, I'm judging, like, I'm assuming a whole lot, but holy shit, that's cool. Family plot.
It's just, I always wanted that. To be buried there, I always thought that's where I'd like to end up and lay there.
I think that's cool.
Not that I'm going to know anything about it anyway, but particularly after becoming an atheist, I don't have any intention of preserving this body or anything like that. Right. At all like that. And my late wife, Joe's mom, she had a lot of health issues and stuff throughout her life, particularly toward the end, and she had all kinds of health issues, and she was determined. She said, I'm going to be cremated. She says, if Jesus needs this body to raise up, then, I'm in some trouble already anyway. She was more than happy to be cremated. I wouldn't mind being cremated if that was it. It's just that it's something I've always thought about.
Well, I mean, you get a family tradition, in a space. Mm-hmm. I think that's really...
Well, I think, honestly, I think that it ends with him, too. I don't think that Amber or I, either one of us, have any plans of doing that. Yeah, I'll probably be cremated and scattered in the wind. Maybe, if there's like when Mom did pass away, we cremated her and put her in the ground. I mean, we put her little container in a spot. And what's really great, and I've only been out there once since she passed away. Taking up space in the cemetery, I might add. Oh, yeah, taking up like yours.
Oh, see, that's just as bad. I don't like her. I'm just kidding.
I'm judging your dead mom, Joe.
Yeah. Sorry. I've heard so many stories about both of you. It's fun. It's fun to see your dad now and talk to him. Like,
what were you saying, Jason?
Oh, I have my late wife's ashes in a cross on a necklace, so I carry her everywhere with me.
My sister moved in with me, and she has her husband's ashes in a little box above her bed.
Yeah. You were in a cross on your person?
Yeah. Which is ironic because I date mostly atheist women.
Well, you're an atheist yourself, right? Or an agnostic, right, Jason?
I'm not really anything. My mom always made religion a joke.
That's like his answer about politics. Like, I'm not.
No, she told. I was baptized, but then my mom told me when my dad left that I was Jewish. And then when I asked for a bar mitzvah, she was like, no, you're not Jewish. You're not. You'll figure it out yourself. So for years, she just laughed at me because I would think I was Jewish,
We found out I found out I was part Jewish after my grandma died. Like, we didn't find out till she died that she was Jewish because she was so shamed. She was so shamed of having some Jew, and it's female too. It's like that line is passed through the female. So every time I mention that, all my Jewish friends are like, "Yeah, was your mom or dad?" I'm like, "I know what you're trying to say here." I'm like, "It was my mom." My mom's side, it was through the female. Like, hey, I know what you're doing here. Like, you're not real Jew.
No, I think you're all Jewish or no Jewish. I don't think you can be half Jewish. I'm not.
That's
quite
not
sure.
true. I mean, it's God's people, man. You got the blood running through you.
Was it David Cross was like, he wanted to leave the Jewish church and he went to the rabbi and was like, I don't think I'm a Jew. And he goes, well, let me ask you something, David. Your mother's vagina, was your mother's vagina Jewish? And he was like, yeah. He's like, then you're a Jew,
Did she move to Boca Raton when she retired? Then she's a Jew. David.
Sorry, David. Oh, I love it.
I have a cross in my kitchen. And I think I had a roommate move in. I think it was my last roommate moved in, and he walked in. He's like, yeah, this place is cool. And then he just stopped and looked up. He just stopped and he just stared. And I'm like, it's a symbol, man. It's a symbol of my vacation to Mexico, dude. And he's like, oh, okay. I was so confused, dude, because I swear to God, you're pretty atheist. I'm like, yeah, I am, but it's still a symbol of my my vacation trip. I enjoyed it.
That's what I have to tell women. That's my wife's ashes. It's not a cross.
Because that's less creepy somehow.
yeah, that's less creepy. Don't mind the Jesus statue that I'm keeping of hers.
Her ashes aren't in that. It's okay.
Right.
I still find myself singing or humming some of the old songs I used to sing,
Well, we were talking about that, the power of the music. Yeah, they don't have any power over it. I wonder, knowing what we know now, as far as us coming from religion, Jason, you didn't have much, but, where do you see, I see so much, I see fear moving this country more towards church and state being a singular thing. And Trump's cabinet of, Jeff Sessions and Betsy DeVos and Pompeo being the most pious, one of the most, we talk about him being the wolf and the scoundrel and the bad guy, but he has one of the most pious cabinets that's ever existed.
Don't forget William Barr, yeah.
Or William Barr or his buddy Mike Pence. Mm-hmm. All those are the scariest part to me of his entire administration, is that he's surrounded himself with this fervent religious movement.
And the scary thing is that all of that at one time meant that you could expect a certain type of morality.
Right.
It might not have been, it had its flaws for sure and all that stuff, but there was a certain type of morality. Yes, it was judgmental of things that they didn't agree with, but these people are immoral. Oh my God. Jerry Epstein and Barr's father Barr's father actually was a mentor for Jerry Epstein.
Jeffrey.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right.
You don't need to say his name. You don't need to say his name right. There's no reason we should ever have to say his name correctly.
Oh, Jimmy Epstein, that fucking asshole.
Jimmy.
Jack off Epstein. Yeah, I don't care what you call him. Just call him God.
So it's
all connected.
There's no morality anymore. I mean, you can't even expect them to cover it up
really well at all. Hashtag Maxwell didn't get COVID.
Oh yeah, she didn't. That's right.
Yeah,
Ghislaine Maxwell did not get COVID yet.
She's going through it. That's what I mean, covering it up, like the Epstein murder, death, and I mean, who knows what that is? But it's blatant. Like, I think that we have historically, as a country, been a little bit more careful to hide our stuff under the rug from our own people, and for the rest of the world. And now it's just kind of like it's turning into, two whistleblower doctors fell out of a window last week in Minsk or somewhere, and you're like, well, that's kind of obvious. Like, this little like drip, someone was poisoned or like supersonic microwaved in their apartment or hotel. Like, it's just so blatant and obvious.
I've got to win the election, so let's put a guy who hates the U.S. Post Office as the Postmaster General and stop delivering the mail. So, I mean, it's become so blatant and so obvious.
But then shout that it's going to be rigged. He says the quiet part out loud. He's saying it's going to be rigged. He's saying he's rigging it.
Yeah, I mean,
no.
He's like, he's one of the most.
He'll have to deny the election's results because it was rigged.
Right. He's already planning for that for himself and for both directions. Like, he's already planning for that.
Yeah.
Right.
But he's one of the most basic persons to analyze psychologically. Like, he's the type that if he's saying he's accusing you of something, he's doing that. Like, that's the easiest thing, like the election rigging. And like, I mean, they're just using this unemployment extension as a political ploy. Those terrible Democrats, like, these are people's lives, and it's like, that's exactly what you're doing. And you're exactly, people are dying from this stuff.
Generally deferring the payroll tax, which will have to be paid next year, and people will
elect me.
Instead of $75 a week, now it's going to add up, and they're going to owe like $1,500, $1,800 at once. and they're not going to have it, and he's going to volunteer to, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just wipe that out, and we'll wipe out all future payroll taxes.
Right. If you reelect me, you can keep this money.
Well, by the time that rolls around, theoretically, he'll be reelected, according to he thinks. And so he can say, well, this $1,800 that you owe, don't worry about it. We'll just wipe it away. And by the way, we're going to erase all other payroll taxes from your future. And that's going to destroy Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what we're happening right now. And that's the danger we have. And as much as they're pushing their agenda worldwide, the family, that documentary, I can't stress how important that was. Me learning so much about the religious right doing all the things they're doing worldwide, but they're pushing this agenda here.
Could we try something maybe in a month or so? Not now. I know, like, don't people have like Zoom dates where they like watch TV together?
Yeah.
And like talk and shit. Is like they like date that way?
No, there is.
Is there an app for that, or does people just use Zoom for it? Is there like anyway, my point is, let's like sit down one episode and just watch it, and let's stream it live, and then people can like ask questions, and we can just pause the show and like talk and just talk about this while we watch it, and just like pause it, literally like kind of have like a date night with the listeners and with whoever's the panelists, you know?
I'd love that.
Sound like stupid?
I don't know if copyright. I mean, I don't know if we'll be able to. What we'll be able to do with that later
I don't care.
on.
Any of those people who would care to like get mad at us, like I don't care. Like we'll take it. Like honestly, like I don't care. If YouTube would probably kill it, but not if we're talking over it. Facebook would be fine with it.
You know, something else that's fun that I don't want to get off on this immediate tangent, but I just watched the first couple episodes of Oliver Stone's Untold American History, and he kind of starts around World War II, and really it's him narrating. It's Oliver Stone narrating kind of the underbelly of the history we don't talk about as far as from World War II forward. It's a lot of fun too, but nothing in the lines of what we're talking about right now as far as the religious right doing all of their damage.
Yeah.
Did you hear Trump's latest thing that the disease in 1918 ended World War II?
Oh yeah, 1917. It probably ended the world.
It probably ended
World War II. Yeah.
Right.
Crazy.
ended World War II?
Yes.
Correct. The pandemic was such a devastating loss to life in the world. 4 million people died or something like that, that it quite possibly was the end of World War II.
How was it the end of World War II?
I mean, World War I was happening at the time. That's the funny part of this. Like that's what he said yesterday.
Oh yeah, I didn't catch that. Yeah,
it's a small thing. Like I mean, I don't like to harp too hard when someone makes an issue like that. But it's but you just don't know what you're talking about. And that's just another example, you know. Now
2 Corinthians.
Yeah, so that was going to say, like, I take 2 Corinthians to be a lot more important mistake.
But they don't. His followers
like he's like my
don't.
favorite. He's like my favorite part of the Bible. My favorite scripture. One of my favorite scriptures in 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians.
Yeah. No, Mike just got back in for a second. He walked in on that. But you know, that is more important than like him saying World War I or World War II. But
I don't know what 2 Corinthians is. So World War II
2 Corinthians is a book.
Is funnier to me. That's all.
Oh.
Yeah. 2 Corinthians.
Oh, you don't know what that is? So what's really interesting, I don't want to get into this. I'm going to for a second. What's really interesting about Corinthians, those books in particular, is so much of religious services and fundamentalist Christians and like let's say rule followers. They love Corinthians because Corinthians like, here, do this, do that, do this. And what Mike said earlier was that, like, you know, those letters were letters from Paul, and Paul's one of the biggest players in the Bible. I mean, he's probably like from like a non-denominational sense, he's the Peter, you know, he's the church, like he's the one, honestly, he's the number one apostle. And all of these letters, Jason, are him writing to churches that's having real big problems, and he's like, do this. Yeah, women need to just shut up. Like this is a wild feast over there, like you said. You just tell your women in this church, just shut up. Like let's get this back in order, and then we'll figure stuff out. And then they take this letter verbatim, and they're like, women can't wear makeup. Women need to shut up. Like women cannot be leaders. Women cannot teach. And they take this one example of one man talking to one church, and they like make it blanket rules. And in nowhere of those books is Paul like, you should definitely all do this. I mean, he's talking to
forever, right?
Yeah, I mean, forever.
The thing about Paul's letters, Paul went around establishing churches, and he actually trained other evangelists, Barnabas and Mark and some of these others, to go around and establish churches all around. So there were all these churches that sprang up, but they were all growing up independently and without any direction. And so some of them went one direction and some of them went another. Right. And Paul was going around and visiting these churches, and then he would write letters to them. Even when he was in prison in Rome before he was killed, he would write all these letters back to these different churches, the church in Rome, the one in Ephesus, the Ephesians, and the one, and he wrote 2 letters to Corinth. They were so bad. And he wrote, so the Corinthians. So that's what all these letters are.
Right.
These the letters that Paul wrote. But
now, Corinth, Texas, or Corinth, Arkansas? Are you talking about? Sorry.
Corinth, bumfuck Egypt is where.
Oh, technically, I think that's its name, right? Actually.
Yeah. We're talking about Trump using he's calling it the wrong thing. Jason is the crux of that joke. That he's referring to his favorite scripture as 2 Corinthians, when everybody that actually knows any damn thing about the damn Bible knows that it's 1st and 2nd Corinthians. So he's calling it blatantly the wrong thing in front of a crowd of
anyone who's ever gone to church.
Yeah, anyone who's ever gone to church. It's like saying the word Thomas, like Thomas, like. But
that just like that, just like religion. Just like racism is not a deal breaker. For the religious right, his complete lack of knowledge about the actual scripture means nothing to them. And as a matter of fact, it emboldens their stance of support behind him, because they're like, he's this imperfect vessel that is holding all the, he's our guy. Yeah. And something we talked about earlier with the Mormons and with some of these other religions, he is bringing the business side. He's marrying the state and the church for them.
Yeah. And this solidified like the 90s, 80s, when like the religious became Republican, right? Like, when did that happen for you? Like, when did you think that happened in our country?
Jerry Falwell and a lot of those people began. They supported Nixon. They supported a lot of these other Republicans that came later. Okay. Part of it was the racism, because a lot of most of the evangelical churches, but it's not just that though. They weren't just the white ones, but these people began to follow behind these Republicans when the Republicans started touching on their single issues, particularly the gays and the abortions.
Yep.
So they actually built up there was a woman, I don't know if you're familiar with a woman named Phyllis Schlafly. Mm-mm. She died a few years ago, a couple of years ago, not very long ago, actually, a year or two ago. And she was like in her 80s or so. She was a horrible, horrible woman. She was anti-feminist. She was strongly anti-feminist. She was very anti-abortion. She was very anti-gay. She was Anita Bryant on crack.
She's the one that stopped ERA, right? Or that fought against the ERA?
She worked to stop she fought against the ERA. She was a woman who went around fighting against women's rights. And because of Christianity and because of the Christian right. And she was vehement about it and merciless and cruel. But anyway, she was a huge supporter of Ronald Reagan, among other people. And they always, line up. They'd never line up behind the Democrats. And that's one of the reasons that the far right and the evangelicals today don't care anything about Donald Trump and his personal morals. He's going to be against abortion. And if they can save one 3-cell fetus or embryo or fetus or something from being aborted, in spite of the fact that a woman's body casts those things off in droves, over their lifetime.
Cast a fair share of my own souls.
Why then it doesn't matter what else he does. And then they become these single issue people. That and his prosperity gospel thing. Guys, I've got to go. I really have enjoyed this.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Great to have you on, man.
You've been wonderful, Mike. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mike,
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. And I wish you best luck and all the others that happen. Best things happen to
you. Thank you. We'll catch up later. Nice to see you.
Bye.
Love you, man.
Love you too.
Love you too.
I was going to say,
it's really great.
Another thing
it's
is
really great that he had a chance to find who he really is, that he didn't have to live hiding. I'm really happy for him that he's become who he is. That's really great.
No, it's and to see the transformation of him before, and I don't have many memories. I found out when I was 12 that my dad's gay, but I don't have a whole lot of memories of time before that. But he wasn't a pleasant and happy person a lot of the time when I was really young. He was just so serious. Part of that's also the fact that he was raising, my sister and myself alone, and that's I can't even imagine the stress that he was under constantly to keep food on our table, keep us happy and healthy, and then not being able to at all be who he was. But the transformation of him after he came out of the closet was profound.
Awesome?
Yeah.
I enjoyed the line dancing story. It was fun.
I had a father-in-law that he was a deacon in churches, Catholic churches, but then he said, "I'm gay," and he went to the forest preserve and he had sex and he came back with AIDS, and that was his life, and he died. So I think it's really awesome that your dad is like, he discovered it and like he gets to enjoy it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really cool.
Well, and he came out right around the time that the AIDS epidemic was in its full swing. And he, that was kind of a struggle whenever this COVID thing kind of came around, whenever my sister and I were confronting him about, unfortunately we had to tell him, like, you can't go outside, you can't leave your house. He's like, "Joseph, I lived through the AIDS epidemic." And I was like, "Yeah, but we don't, we're pretty sure this is getting transferred like by breathing near each other." And he's like, "We didn't know how AIDS started." And I was like, that's fair. But we pretty much knew that it was a particular group of people getting it, to some degree. There were indicators, and it was just, he lived through the AIDS epidemic in a time when it was not safe to be openly gay.
And it was assumed that it was only a gay disease too. Like you were only gay,
well, thanks to Ronald Reagan, right? Ronald Reagan just portrayed it that way.
Well, he didn't even talk about it. That was his big thing. He didn't even talk about it.
No, Nancy.
To finish one point we were talking about when your dad left, I wanted to say this.
Please.
Like the evangelical right and the blah, blah, blahs and the support the wolf and the Trumps and okay, that's fine. That's fine. You're gonna like this is God. Listen, it says in the book. I forget which book. Mm-hmm. It says that God, He's in charge of putting all the world leaders in their place. So He is here. God appointed Trump. And he's our boy.
They're sure of it.
But 4 years ago, the Antichrist was running the country. So like they're like Bibling this. Like if it's a Democrat, no God, no religion, Antichrist.
Right.
I'm sure there's about to be a woman vice president running. I'm sure there's going to be the period jokes. And she can't control her temper. And she's black. And they're inferior. And it's like all of that. And it's like even Obama,
well, the birthers are going to come back
because he's a black man, because he's a Democrat. Like, I'm sorry, you're not on Team God.
Or he's not black enough.
But okay. But even if but if it's a Republican, it's totally godly blessed, and it's disgusting. It's disgusting that religion is co-opted a party, and that's disgusting because I know plenty of Democrats that believe in God.
Yep.
Plenty, and most of them do. And most people are middle of the road, and Democrats typically are middle of the road. Let's try to help everyone out. Let's try to figure this out. Like they're not progressive. It's not even a very good progressive party at all. If you look at Biden and Harris, that's not very progressive. It's not,
it's super conservative. Way more conservative than I would want. But here we are. And,
go ahead. But the thing is when they were picking between all the candidates, we thought Donald Trump was this powerhouse before COVID. But then COVID hit and he got really weak and stupid. And honestly, anyone on that stage could have defeated Trump. And if we had known that, we might have thrown all our eggs into Elizabeth Warren or a Kirsten Gillibrand or even a Pete Buttigieg, because any one of them could have beaten them.
I'd like to believe that that's true. I will be interested. I surely hope that we get a Biden presidency just to turn this thing around. But I'm not super confident. I want to be. I really want to be. I want to be like super positive, but I just. Yeah.
I'm moving my mic closer. I'm going to sit backwards. I'm in pain.
Yeah. No, I got you.
I don't tolerate anything but Trump losing. I'm sorry.
Right.
Like I don't want this country if he wins. I don't want like
my dad's in that same.
I don't want to be an American like a United States citizen. Like I don't want to associate with them. I want to atheist them. Like I don't no longer a part of this, guys.
And somebody had a joke. Canada, please invade us now.
Straight expat myself.
All these QAnon people talking about Tom Hanks moving to Greece and getting his Greece citizenship. I would do it in a fucking heartbeat. If I didn't have any time here, why the fuck shouldn't Tom Hanks live in Greece?
That's right.
I don't want to be a part of this fucking place if we continue down this road we're on right now.
I don't really know this well. It's the whole idea that because he's a sexual abuser, right? Is that why
that's what they keep saying? Yeah, and
I mean, it's possible.
I don't know.
I mean, we have never heard that before, but if any of the Epstein stuff comes out and he's one of them, all right. So is Clinton, maybe. Okay.
Yep.
So is Trump. Okay.
And if we get some proof, absolutely.
Let him burn, dude. Yep. Let him burn. So it's fine. Oh, sorry.
To the ground.
Tiger Woods was on it. I'm sorry. Burn you too. Like, cool. I mean, I've unfriended people that I've really liked. Like, I can do someone I don't know pretty easily, dude.
Right.
Like, I mean, I hate to be that kind of that cancel-y type person, but I just, I got to live life and feel good about myself.
Pedophilia is a deal breaker for me, and
it totally is,
and it fucking should be. And it's like, but so are Nazis. Nazis are a deal breaker for me, but that seems to be like controversial now. Like my sister has been in multiple conversations recently where she's attacking. Like there's a guy in Northwest Arkansas. Okay, they filmed him, took some pictures of this dude standing on the front bumper of his truck with his arms crossed. And he's got his sidearm. It looks like a 45, maybe a 1911 45, sitting on his sidearm. And on his mask is a giant swastika. Okay. And so my sister has been on these posts, and he stood there for way too long, obviously. But she got on these posts and was like, this shouldn't be tolerated. And she got attacked because of her intolerance of, we talked about this last week, of the intolerance of fascism. It's like, no, we can't tolerate fascism. And I don't know how to explain that to you, that we can no longer allow for this to be existing in our world. It's not okay to be promoting fascism and promoting Nazism in particular. And then making the comparison that someone who is attacking the Nazi is worse or in the same boat as a Nazi. It's like your comparison of somebody saying, well, Joe Biden also is kind of a creeper, but is he the same level of creeper as Donald Trump? And
Jason flowed out of me today. I was having this exact same conversation with someone, and I won't say about who, but I always say that and I make it obvious, right? So someone was speaking, or I was basically defending the idea of what Jason was saying about like Biden and Trump. Someone I know is just like, this is all just sick to me. I'm going to bury my head. I don't even want to deal with this. Let's wait for the next president. Like I'll come back and talk to you guys, and then it's the next president. And it's like, no, what this person is saying is that like you're comparing Trump's badness to Biden's badness. And there's not even a comparison. Like, oh, maybe they both diddled a woman's vagina at one point in their life, but that doesn't make them equal. You know, like even if that's true, like this man has openly done this horrible things to like we've got records of him doing this, you know, like
163,000 people
we've watched
dead.
him every day. Yeah. And we've watched him every day since then. And now just easily comparing him to Biden is to me is laughable. And I don't, whatever I said, it was very similar to what you had said, Jason, on an episode when we talked
That's
about
my
it.
zero tolerance.
I thought about your face when I said it, Jason. I thought about your face.
I love you.
Yeah, I thought about your hat, and like I thought I saw you doing this, and I was like,
yeah, it's frustrating because you can't compare the two. You just can't.
No. But they are, and they're constantly.
I mean, they're both politicians,
and we're just scratching the surface right now. You know, I look forward to more episodes coming up of talking about the elections coming up, especially now that we know that Biden's picked his Kamala Harris. I look forward to talking with you guys about that and seeing how the racist dribble will start to come back up to the surface. These people will start to talk more and more trash about her. About the birthers are coming back. I was saying that earlier. Yeah, you know, we're going to see all the people saying that she's an anchor baby and she can't be the president. And this is all about Nancy Pelosi. Even today, I saw somebody post something about, you know, this is all to make Nancy Pelosi the president. No, if they were making Nancy Pelosi the president, they would have actually, you know, successfully impeached Donald Trump and Mike Pence and gotten Nancy Pelosi the presidency. That's not going to happen. It's just, this is absurd times. I'm glad I have you guys to talk about this with. I really am.
I have one political comment. Hey, please. Texas, Ted Cruz, what the fuck?
Yeah, guys.
Fair.
I'm done.
Yeah, fair.
Well, I mean, we just vote so red. You know.
You did.
No, we do. I mean, even in my blue town, we still vote. It still turns red because there's like suburbs.
That's so sad.
So, I mean, now this next election, the president might be blue, maybe. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's close. It's close. I mean, we'll see.
I don't mind a check and balance. I don't mind some Republicans having some power, just not all the power like that, you know?
No, they have all the power here. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know what the answer to that is, right?
No. I don't know why you people.
Education.
Gotcha. Stupid people follow blindly, right?
I mean, yeah. No offense. Like that's truth. That's the truth.
Yeah.
Well, and religion catches all the ignorance too. Hey, I love you guys, and
we'll do this again. We either got to watch The Family together, or you got to watch it, listeners and Jason.
Yeah.
One thing before you leave, Joe. My brother's a big small groups person. So when I saw that documentary, I was really, really scared because he does he'll go to Washington for workshops. And I saw that, and I still don't have the answer if it's related to this. But when I saw it, I was worried for my brother's family. You know what I mean? Anyway, it's looking crazy. Yeah. Anyway, guys, this has been episode 1 about religion of the multi-episode part that we will get 6, 7. Oh, let's do 6 versions. Yeah, because let's do 6. All right, guys. Well, we love you, and we will talk to you soon.
Love you guys.
Roswell may as well be another blip on the radar screen, another soulless machine, hopeless. I'm all alone here. Tell me I don't need some starlit company. I think I'll go to bed. Rest for my nervous head. Black light eyes dead. Come to me slow, my dreams, and I'll watch you rise. the darkness. I should have held my tongue. I seem like the lying one. My friends, they all resent me. Don't wanna come near me. I guess that's fine.
Tonight's music brought to you by Denton's very own Maple. Track 1 was I Lost Feeling in My Left Hand, and the outro was Roswell Underground. Look for Maple's interview in the future on Denton County Collective.